once again, Bev suggested this topic, intercessory prayer. And I added, what is it and how does it work? So I'll just start out by saying I know what it is, I don't know how it works. So I'm not going to attempt to answer that question. I think I will probably end up raising more questions than I actually answer, because I'm not sure about what happens when two or more are gathered, where the power goes. Is it in the person that's on the receiving end or the ones that are giving? Is there some power that is exchanged between people that we just don't understand? So I'm not going to try to define it in a way that I think I have some understanding of it, but I've been on the receiving end of the prayers of other people, many people, and I've been on the giving end. And I recommend both. You know, it's just something we do, whether it doesn't matter if we understand it or not. But so that's the topic. So what is it? Intercessory prayer is a form of prayer where individuals pray on behalf of others, seeking divine intervention by bringing their needs, concerns, and requests before a higher power. Now, this is a conventional definition, and we may not agree with that. I trip up a little bit on this idea of seeking divine intervention. That one bothers me a little bit, and also bringing our requests before a higher power, as if a higher power needs our request to know what it is. You know, these are some of the questions this will raise, and hopefully it causes us all to think about, you know, things in different ways. But this is a convention. I probably would not define this in this way, and I guess you'll end up by the end of this talk with my definition. But this definition is one that is widely accepted and invoked, often on behalf of those whose lives are impacted during a national tragedy. And we're seeing this unfold in Texas. You know, we're seeing the thing there. There's still 160 some people missing, and they've discovered several dead. So it's a big thing to think about. It's on the news a lot, and causes me to think about it in this way. This is an empowering service that plays an important role for those who are on the receiving and giving ends. So I've watched several interviews with people that were involved in the floods and that lost people, and how they appreciate, you know, the knowing that other people are thinking about them, that they're offering prayers. And there is the very strong belief in this culture that when a whole bunch of people are praying about something, it causes God to change somehow, to come forth with greater assistance or whatever. And that's, again, one of the questions I want to raise on how we think about this. But it is a thing that we need to do. You know, we need to be involved in group prayer, group consciousness. And I found myself stopping several times through the week just thinking about these families. And, you know, I received a phone call one day that said, "We found your son dead on the floor." And I don't think I will ever forget that. In fact, I know I won't, the impact that something like that has. And then after hearing that, I had to hang up the phone and explain to his mother that situation. And that was one of the toughest periods in my life. That was a year ago, January. One of the toughest periods in my life. But one of the shining moments was just knowing how many people were praying with us and for us through that time. There's something very empowering about knowing that. There's nothing that can change the impact on that. But I feel that I can talk about it now because I know what it is what these parents are going through. family members are going through and losing a loved one that's just completely out of the blue. This phone call I got was like the last thing on my mind. You just can't even imagine it. I couldn't even process it. But it's brain numbing. So it is very comforting to know that there are other people that are in that with you in some way and through prayer. And it just, if you just even take God out of the picture altogether, just to think other people are thinking about you and trying to see you get through this in the very best possible way, that's extremely empowering. And, when we come across someone who's lost somebody, we feel like we're at a loss for words. We don't know what to say to them. And so what I realized in that situation is you can't say the wrong thing. You can't say anything wrong, just your being there, just knowing you're there, just I'm thinking of you kind of thing. That's it's very powerful. So what changes when this kind of thing happens, when we join others in prayer and focus on a particular situation? There is an energy that is set up, and let's not necessarily try to figure it all out, but just accept that it's there and engage in it. But here's 4 questions that are worth looking at. How we view prayer will depend on how we view God. Would a collective prayer encourage God to act, to give attention to a situation that God would otherwise miss? Is that our attitude? And I would imagine most of us here would say, no, that's not our attitude. But what if you don't pray? What if you don't ask God for help? Is God go about God's business and not pay attention to us? I'm not trying to answer this question. I'm just saying, how do we view the nature of God? Does our prayer get God's attention? Does collective prayer increase the power of God? The more people pray, the more God acts. There's just what's going on in our thinking when we say, let's do a collective prayer. Let's all pray about this together. What are we empowering? What are we changing? Is it the nature of God? And again, I'm not answering this question. I'm just asking it. How do we think of this God as a presence? Why do some seem to be spared by our prayers while others are not? And this, to me, is the big one. It's a big one. We've got many people were rescued in this flood, but there are some that are not. So how do we view that? I want to talk about that in just a minute, because it raises to me another very important question. Does prayer change God, or does it change us? And that one I think I can answer. If we can change God, then God must not be as strong as we think. The way I perceive God now is God is always in action. And it is, are we in harmony with that action? And that will help us answer some of these questions, I think, to take this approach. It's not a matter of changing God, it's a matter of, am I in line with how God is acting? Like what I consider, if some people are not found in this particular situation, would I consider that only my prayer is only halfway successful? Is God only halfway successful? What is that? That really pushes us into a different place, a whole different way to think about this whole thing. There are studies that show intercessory prayer does make a difference, but there are also many studies that show it does not. And I took time to look at both sides of this. scientific studies that have been launched. And I think we're faced with a similar question when we think of Jesus as a healer. Did he possess special healing powers, or was it, as he often suggested, the faith of the person healed that brought about the change? So in a sense, does it matter how we answer that question? But how we answer that question will depend on how we think of God. And in the case like with Jesus, did he have special healing power, or did people believe in him? If he had special healing power, why couldn't he always heal? Why were there times when he was not successful? Why did it say that back in his hometown people didn't believe in him, so he couldn't do any great works? Why did he work on a blind man where the blind man was not fully healed the first time around? It took two tries. The first time he could only see men as trees walking. So Jesus himself, I believe, put a lot of power in the person and in the person's faith. Where is your faith? Do you want to be healed? Do you want to walk? Do you want to get out of this depression? Do you want your life to start looking different? Are you willing to do things differently to get different results? So a lot of it falls on us, because we can say, I don't want to do any of those things, and we can continue to affirm that we're the victim of circumstance. There's nothing we can do about any of it. That it's just my lot in life. It's who I am. I was born as I am, and I can't get beyond it. Or I can start thinking, there's a power in me that's greater than what I believe I am. And I can tap that power, and I can bring out that power. But that requires a change in me. And what is that extra power that comes out? It's more of me. It's awakening to more of what I am at the deepest level. And when I am, this next slide says it, concerning the question of whether prayer changes God or us, I fall into the prayer changes us side. If I have a problem and I allow my energy to be drained by fear, negative visualization, and the continual rehearsal of negative outcomes, the problem looks and feels bigger than me. You know what that feels like? We've all been in that situation where we look at something that's going on and it looks bigger than us. And see, that's the value of somebody stepping in and saying, I'll pray with you, I'll pray for you, I'll affirm your strength, because they can help open your eyes to that power within yourself, that you're so focused on the problem that you forget who you are. I mean, I'm talking from myself. When I'm feeling small, and I'm feeling much smaller than whatever the issue is in front of me, if I just look at my thought processes, I'm totally shut down, focused only on an appearance, forgetting that I have a lot more inside of me if I can just let it out. And sometimes a person can come by and say just the right word. Somebody like Diane will read Daily Word, and that'll be just the right thing that I need to hear to shift my thought. But what is that? It's not changing God. It's changing my relationship to God. And if I think, there's 100 people praying for me, that would probably make that change a lot easier, a lot faster, just feeling like I'm not alone. But when I feel like I'm not alone, what's happened is that change occurs in me. I'm saying, well, I don't know how to walk, I don't know how to be healed, but I want to be. I want to know. I'm open to changing my thinking, changing my mind. But if I completely shut down, and it could be 10,000 people are praying for me, if I'm completely shut down and think that this problem is bigger than I am, there's probably not much that can happen to change that. There's always stories that will say otherwise. You can always find ways to think of it differently or to see it differently. And we call those miracles. It looks like a miracle. There's no way that I can be saved from this, and yet I am. So we can take that approach too, and that kind of makes the God thing a crapshoot. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes not. And why does it work for one and not another? There are families grieving today, and there are families that are totally thankful, totally happy with their outcome. And that's kind of a hard thing to figure out sometimes, unless we look at a much bigger picture. And that's what we're going to look at. If I'm empowered with faith, know that my soul cannot be defeated regardless, and have no doubt that God is my unfailing source, I see the same problem as very manageable. How we see the problem depends on how we see ourselves. And that, to me, is one of the keys to prayer. Again, if God is always active, it's, again, like gravity. It's always active, but you can do like Pat and fall down and hurt yourself. But it doesn't mean that gravity stopped working all of a sudden. It's working quite well. It's working too well, actually. Our relationship to gravity may not be, as we want it. We may get results we're not looking for. But who would think to pray to gravity to get it to change the way it behaves? If I did that, all of you'd start floating around. You probably wouldn't like that. So we don't want to do what?
Maybe we would.
Maybe you would, yeah. Well, sometimes that would be okay. But you see what I mean. If my prayer can change the nature of God, then that means God is changeable. And I am much more stable if I realize that God is changeless, that I can harmonize with that activity of God. I can open my mind to that something greater, and feel, I've shared stories of you back up as far as you can go and then you say no more. That's as far as I'm going to go. This fear is taking me down to this place and I'm not going any further down. That's it. And you find strength you don't know you have. And what is that strength you don't know you have? It is God. Call it whatever you want, but it is energy that we forgot we had because we were so focused on the negative. All the energy was draining out into that. It's like a short circuit. And so we feel like we're powerless. When we have the full power of God, we have access to that. But how are we focused? Where are we focused? What are we focused on? Is this thing out here bigger than me, or am I bigger than it? And by me, I don't mean this little sniveling me. I mean this bigger self that I've forgotten was there. It's there. And it will come forth. In time, it'll come forth. You'll back up just as far as you're going to go, and that self is going to say, that's it. You've gone far enough. And you will stand up and you will look at the situation in a way totally different and walk through it. That's been my experience. I'm sure it's been yours too in some way. But this does, the question I want to raise here is this idea of the near-death experience. I always have to bring some facet of this into the talk. Because the one thing that all these people say is they were told, it's not your time. Go back. It's not your time. Some were given the opportunity to go forward or go back to their life. But that raises to me one of the most important questions we can meditate on. What is your time? If we're looking at a disaster where 121 people are gone and many others are missing, what was their experience? Was their experience Did they have the opportunity to go back but didn't want to? Or were they told it is their time? And the ones that were saved, that it wasn't their time? What is that? I think that's one of the most interesting questions we can ask. And it's, again, this comes up every time you hear someone share their story about dying and coming back. 99% of them will say, I was told it's not my time, you got to go back. So what are the ones that go on? What of our son? He didn't come back. Does that mean it was his time? If it's his time, how can I fight that? How can I resist that? That it takes on a whole new meaning, because his time is not my time. I would prefer that didn't happen. But when you look at it from that perspective, and we look at God from that perspective, why does God act in one case and not seeming not the other? We don't know about this whole soul thing. Is it your time or not? Is it my time? So I think that's a very important thing. And I actually think about this a lot. Why do these people keep saying this? It's not your time. What is your time? What are we here to do? What are we here to accomplish? The answer that they come up with is that somehow they chose to come here. We chose to come here. And we have not fulfilled, when we're told it's not our time, it means we have not yet fulfilled the reason we chose to come here. You go in that next room to get something, you forget why you went in there. Turn around and you hear this little voice, it's not your time. You didn't find what you came here to find. And I told you that happened to me just the other day. And so I stopped and I thought, what did I come here to find? What did I come here to do? And then I remembered what it was. So maybe it's like that. It's like we step into this earthly room because we had a reason we wanted to do it, and then something happens where we check out and we're told it's not your time. Well, you forgot why you went in this room. So you need to remember what that is so you don't have to come back. Go home, go sit in your chair and come back. But I think that's a very important question, and you may not all have that same problem, but I listen to these people quite a bit. I don't believe them all. There are some of these cases that are they feel very authentic, and there are others that feel like somebody's trying to sell a book or whatever. It's become quite a cottage industry. But that question is almost always raised. It's not your time. What does that mean? So when I think of it from that perspective, I think in a what we call a tragedy, those who went on, somehow it is their time. I couldn't talk about that with our son right away, but I can talk about it now, to think about it from that perspective. And to me, it's a very healing attitude to have. If somebody goes on, it's their time. They wanted to go on for whatever reason. They made that choice. There's something about that I like, that I respond positively to, because their choice is not to die. It's to continue living, but in a different way. And I don't find any problem with that. I don't have any resistance to that kind of thought. And they all say too that, I wanted to go on. I didn't want to come back to my wife and my kids, and they feel very guilty about that. It was a very beautiful experience, but they did for whatever reason. And that's a very interesting thing to think about as well. How can we just step off this planet and leave everything behind and want to? I think that's a very interesting thing to contemplate. But we're here because we want to be here for whatever reason, and we've forgotten that probably. So I think we need to, when we have situations like this, when we engage in intercessory prayer, that we do it from that larger picture, that larger perspective. To me, it's much healthier. And of course, we're not going to, you can watch the news and hear interviews and all that. That's not where most people are. A tragedy is a tragedy. You know, there's just no other way around it. It's going to cause a lot of pain, and we're going to go through this pain. And I don't want to take that away from anybody if that's where they are. But we're all in this together. We all have the eyes through which we choose to see. And how we see makes a huge difference in how we experience this life. Okay? Never pass on the opportunity to pray for others. God, as the creative life force, is always in full function. We cannot know what the best and highest outcome is for another. If it is their time to depart, nothing we can do will keep them here. If it is not their time to go, no tragedy is big enough to take them. That's what we keep hearing in these stories. If it's your time, you go. If it's not, you don't. And it's a pretty profound attitude to have, a profoundly freeing attitude, I think, to have. That what if we're all here by choice and the ones that aren't here are also there by choice? What right do we have to interfere with that choice? You know, we have none. But it does appear that that is a choice, because there are many people whose body is so ruined in their accident or whatever happened to them that they shouldn't survive it, and yet they're told it's not their time. Go back and you'll be okay. It may take you 10 years to heal, but you'll be okay. Some people have recovered from some miraculous. Read the Anita Morjoni story. She's made the rounds on the near death. She's one of the more famous ones. Girl from Hong Kong that had cancer, died, came back, had a near-death experience, and it's just an incredible story. Or the story of Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon who died and came back. Shouldn't have, but he was told it wasn't his time. So they come back to bodies that should not be able to sustain life. And there are many stories of drownings, people scuba diving, their tank gets ruptured somehow, they're 50 feet under the water, shouldn't survive it, and they actually drown, but somehow they come back. So it seems like whatever situation happens, if we want to come back, we can, no matter what shape the body's in, and we can go through the healing process. So it's just kind of a bigger way to think about this whole prayer thing. How free are we when we offer our prayer to somebody else? Do we say, you make your choice, that's my prayer for you is the best and highest. Whatever that is for you, you may not make the choice that I would agree with, but it's your choice. Because I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what happens when you go unconscious or you go into, whatever experience it is you have. So that helps me take a bigger look at this whole thing. And it gives the idea of intercessory prayer an entirely different meaning. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.